Think back to the last time your knees ached at getting out of bed in the morning, or when your fingers felt stiff before the day had even started, or when a familiar heaviness settled in your body. Not from illness, not from overexertion, but from something harder to name. Most people assume that is simply what getting older feels like. But what if something else was happening beneath the surface? Something that has been quietly building for years, and that science now considers one of the central forces behind many of the most common health concerns in people over 50. Today, we're going to explore 10 plants that researchers, pharmacologists, and traditional healers across multiple civilizations have long associated with the body's ability to manage inflammation. Some of these plants are familiar. Others may genuinely surprise you, and at least one of them is probably sitting in your kitchen right now, being used in ways that only scratch the surface of what it may offer. Stay with me. By the end of this video, you will have a clearer picture of what inflammation actually is, why it matters as we age, and which plants have earned the most serious scientific attention for supporting the body's own natural balance. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something directly. Have you personally experienced joint stiffness, muscle aches, or any kind of persistent discomfort that you suspect might be connected to inflammation? Or have you turned to a natural remedy, perhaps something your grandmother used, and found that it genuinely helped? Leave your experience in the comments below. You may be surprised how many people in this community are asking the same questions and walking the same path. Let us begin with something that surprises many people when they first hear it. Inflammation is not your enemy. It is, in fact, one of your body's most intelligent and necessary tools. When you injure a joint or your body identifies something harmful, inflammation is part of the healing response. Blood flow increases, immune cells converge, repair begins. This is a beautifully designed system. The problem is that it was designed for acute threats, the kind that resolve in days. It was not designed to run at low intensity, continuously, for years. And yet in many people, particularly as they move through their 50s, 60s, and beyond, that is precisely what happens. The inflammatory response does not fully switch off. It settles into a quiet, persistent background hum. Researchers call this chronic low-grade inflammation, and the more closely they study it, the more it appears connected to joint deterioration, cardiovascular changes, digestive imbalance, and even shifts in cognitive function over time. What makes this so compelling is that many ancient healing traditions, Ayurvedic medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, Native American herbalism, and Mediterranean folk medicine, appear to have recognized this phenomenon long before biochemistry existed, to name it. They observed patterns across generations, and they discovered that certain plants seem to help the body find its way back to balance. When modern pharmacologists analyzed those same plants, they found specific compounds that interact directly with the biological pathways involved in inflammation. The wisdom of the ancients was pointing at something real. Let us now walk through the 10 most significant of those plants. Plant 1, turmeric. If you had to name a single plant that has done the most to bridge traditional healing wisdom and modern anti-inflammatory research, it would almost certainly be this one. Turmeric zarine, the brilliant golden root of curcuma longa, has been at the heart of Ayurvedic medicine for at least 4,000 years. In ancient India, it was not simply a spice. Healers applied it to swollen joints and slow-healing wounds. They prepared warming drinks by simmering it in milk with honey, what is now known as golden milk. They incorporated it so deeply into daily cooking that the line between nourishment and medicine became intentionally blurred. That integration, it turns out, was pharmacologically wise. The reason turmeric commands such attention in modern research is a compound called curcumin, part of a broader family called curcuminoids. Curcumin has been the subject of thousands of peer-reviewed studies. What researchers keep finding centers on its relationship with a molecule called NENFKB, sometimes described as the body's inflammatory command center. When NFKB is activated, it triggers a cascade of pro-inflammatory compounds throughout the body. Curcumin appears to help modulate this pathway. Research also suggests it may support the body's own antioxidant defenses, helping neutralize compounds that contribute to cellular stress over time. One practical detail worth knowing: curcumin is not easily absorbed by the body on its own. However, combining turmeric with a small amount of black pepper, which contains a compound called piperine, significantly increases absorption. Generations of cooks discovered this pairing instinctively. Pharmacologists later confirmed why it worked. You can incorporate turmeric as a daily tea, added generously to soups and stews, or taken as a standardized capsule. Consistency matters more than quantity, and as we move through this list, keep turmeric in mind. Several of the plants ahead appear to work particularly well alongside it. Plant 2. Ginger, and turmeric are botanical cousins. They belong to the same plant family, and for thousands of years across cultures on opposite sides of the world, healers consistently combined them. Not by coincidence, but because careful observation showed they worked well together. Ginger, Zingiber officinale, carries one of the longest continuous medicinal records of any plant on earth. Ancient Chinese physicians recommended it for joint pain. Ayurvedic healers classified it as a warming herb that moves stagnation through the body. Medieval European physicians kept dried ginger in their dispensaries. In traditional homes across India, the Middle East, and East Asia, fresh ginger was the first thing reached for when joints ached or digestion faltered. Modern research has confirmed much of what those healers observed. Ginger contains active compounds called gingerols and shogaols, which have demonstrated anti-inflammatory and antioxidant activity in clinical studies. These compounds appear to work partly by inhibiting enzymes involved in producing pro-inflammatory molecules, including prostaglandins and leukotrienes. Research also indicates that ginger may contain a proteolytic enzyme that supports the reduction of inflammation and the repair of damaged joint and cartilage tissue, aligning closely with its centuries of use for arthritis and joint discomfort. Studies additionally suggest that regular ginger consumption may support healthy circulation and cardiovascular function. Clinical research has repeatedly found it effective for nausea, sometimes performing comparably to pharmaceutical antiemetics without associated side effects. Fresh ginger grated into hot water with lemon and honey remains one of the simplest medicinal teas you can prepare daily. Dried ginger powder works well in cooking or smoothies. Capsule and extract forms are available for those who prefer a more consistent dose. When you combine ginger with turmeric, as traditional healers so often did, you bring together two related plants working through overlapping but not identical mechanisms. That is not redundancy. That is complementary depth. Plant 3, boswellia. Now we arrive at a plant whose Western name carries the weight of centuries of spiritual and cultural significance: frankincense. The same aromatic resin referenced in ancient Egyptian medical texts, in Ayurvedic writings, and in scripture across multiple traditions. When ancient civilizations treated frankincense as precious enough to trade across continents, they were recognizing something that modern pharmacology has now confirmed in measurable terms. Boswellia resin is extracted from trees native to the arid highlands of India, the Arabian Peninsula, and northeastern Africa. For thousands of years, Ayurvedic healers used it for conditions involving joint pain, stiffness, and inflammatory conditions of the bowel and respiratory tract. The resin was ingested, applied topically, and even burned as incense. The key compounds are called boswellic acids. Among these, a compound designated AKBA has been identified as particularly significant. It appears to inhibit a specific enzyme called 5-lipoxygenase, responsible for producing a class of highly pro-inflammatory molecules called leukotrienes. This mechanism is notably different from both turmeric and ginger, which work on separate inflammatory pathways. Boswellia, in other words, is not duplicating what the earlier plants do. It is targeting a different dimension of the inflammatory cascade entirely. The clinical evidence for boswellia is, by the standards of botanical medicine, unusually strong. Multiple studies of people with osteoarthritis have found meaningful reductions in pain and improvements in joint mobility with standardized boswellia extract. Research on inflammatory bowel conditions has also shown positive signals. This is a plant that has moved from ancient temple ritual to modern clinical trial and performed credibly in both settings. Standardized boswellia capsule extracts are the most reliable form for consistent use. Benefits tend to build over several weeks rather than appearing immediately, which is a common and expected pattern with herbal compounds. Plant 4, willow bark. I want to tell you a brief story about how one plant quietly shaped the history of medicine. Imagine a physician in ancient Egypt, more than 3,000 years ago, prescribing willow bark for fever and pain. Then a Native American healer, a world away and centuries later, reaching for the same tree for the same purpose. Then a medieval European monk carefully recording the properties of willow bark for aching joints. None of these healers had contact with one another, yet all three arrived independently at the same conclusion, that something in the bark of the willow tree could ease pain and reduce inflammation. In the 19th century, chemists finally isolated the active substance responsible, a compound called salicin. The body converts salicin into salicylic acid when it is metabolized. Scientists later synthesized a modified version, acetyl salicylic acid. The world came to know it as aspirin, still one of the most widely used medicines on earth. And its core active ingredient was essentially discovered by traditional healers thousands of years before any laboratory existed. Willow bark is not simply a weaker form of aspirin, however. The bark contains a complex mixture of compounds alongside salicin, including flavonoids and polyphenols, that appear to work together in ways that the isolated synthetic compound does not fully replicate. Some research suggests this natural complexity may make willow bark gentler on the digestive tract than pharmaceutical aspirin. Those taking blood-thinning medications or with known salicylate sensitivity should consult their healthcare provider before using it. Traditionally prepared as a decoction, dried bark simmered in water for 15 to 20 minutes, willow bark is also available today in capsule and standardized extract form. Modern research has found consistent evidence supporting its use for lower back pain and joint-related discomfort, aligning well with its long traditional applications. The story of willow bark is one of the most compelling illustrations of a principle that runs through this entire video. Traditional healers, long before biochemistry existed, were often pointing at exactly the right target. They simply did not yet have the language to explain why. If you find this kind of knowledge valuable, the point where ancient plant wisdom meets modern scientific understanding, then herbal longevity may be exactly the channel you have been looking for. We explore this territory every week. If that interests you, consider subscribing. And now let us continue, because the next 5 plants include some genuinely unexpected discoveries. Plant 5, Devil's Claw. So far, we have traveled through ancient India, the Middle East, and medieval Europe. Now we go south to the dry savannas of southern Africa, where a plant with a striking name and an equally striking pharmacological profile has been used for centuries by indigenous communities. Devil's Claw, Harpagophytum procumbens, earns its name from the hooked, claw-like projections on its seed pods. The plant grows low across sandy soil, but it is the secondary tubers underground that carry the medicine. The indigenous Khoisan and Bantu peoples of Namibia and Botswana discovered long ago that these tubers, properly prepared, could provide meaningful relief for joint pain, muscular aches, and fever. The primary active compounds are iridoid glycosides, with harpagoside being the most studied. These appear to interact with several inflammatory pathways, potentially inhibiting the production of prostaglandins and other pro-inflammatory signaling molecules through mechanisms distinct from the plants we have already discussed. What sets Devil's Claw apart is the volume and quality of clinical evidence behind it. Multiple randomized controlled trials have examined it for lower back pain and osteoarthritis of the hip and knee, consistently showing meaningful pain reductions and improvements in mobility. In Germany, where herbal medicine is formally regulated and evaluated with exceptional rigor, Devil's Claw root has received official approval for joint-related conditions, a level of recognition that relatively few botanical medicines ever achieve. Devil's Claw is most reliably available as standardized capsules or tablets. One additional benefit worth noting: unlike many remedies that may irritate the digestive system, Devil's Claw has historically also been used as a digestive bitter, meaning it may offer supportive benefits for digestion alongside its applications for joint health. Plant 6, green tea. After the ancient temples, desert resins, European forests, and African savannas, our next plant brings us back to something that may feel almost ordinary. But please do not be deceived by its familiarity. Green tea, from Camellia sinensis, is the most widely consumed plant-based beverage on Earth after water, with a continuous history of use in China and Japan stretching back at least 4,000 years. In ancient China, it was first described as a medicinal herb before it was ever considered a social drink. Japanese Buddhist monks incorporated tea practice into daily discipline as a way of maintaining clarity and physical health during long hours of meditation. The key compounds responsible for green tea's anti-inflammatory reputation are called catechins, particularly a molecule known as EGCG, or epigallocatechin gallate. EGCG and related catechins have been shown in numerous studies to interact with inflammatory signaling pathways. They appear to help regulate the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines, the molecular messengers that direct and sustain inflammatory responses, while also exerting significant antioxidant activity that helps neutralize cellular stress. Research has found associations between regular green tea consumption and lower levels of certain inflammatory markers in the blood, particularly in populations where it is consumed habitually over many years. Additional studies suggest benefits for cardiovascular function, blood sugar stability, and cognitive health markers over time. 2 to 3 cups of quality green tea per day is a meaningful and enjoyable daily target. One practical note: use water at around 75 to 80 degrees Celsius rather than a full boil. This preserves more of the catechins and produces a better tasting cup with less bitterness. We are now halfway through this list. Which of these 6 plants have you personally tried? And has any of them made a noticeable difference in how you feel day to day? Tell me in the comments. Those conversations genuinely matter to this community. Plant 7. Rosehip. The next plant is one that I particularly enjoy discussing because it illustrates how easily we overlook something sitting in plain sight. Rosehips, the small jewel-colored fruits that appear on rose bushes after the flowers fade each autumn. Most people see them as decoration. Some know them as a source of vitamin C. Very few consider that they might have something meaningful to contribute to the science of inflammation and joint health. But here's what the research has found. Rosehips contain a specific compound called GOPO, a galactolipid found in the seeds and flesh of the fruit. Galactolipids are not widely discussed in popular health media, which is part of why rosehip's story has remained relatively under the radar. Over the past 2 decades, however, multiple well-designed clinical trials have examined standardized rosehip preparations for joint health outcomes. The results have been consistently encouraging. People with osteoarthritis of the knee and hip who took standardized rosehip powder reported significant reductions in pain and meaningful improvements in mobility compared to placebo groups. Several studies also found that participants required less supplemental pain medication, a practical measure of real-world benefit. Beyond GOPO, rosehip provides a striking amount of vitamin C, significantly more than oranges by weight, important for maintaining the collagen that gives joint cartilage its structure and resilience. Rosehip also contains carotenoids and flavonoids with antioxidant properties. Rosehip tea is pleasant and widely available. Rosehip powder can be stirred into yogurt or smoothies. For those specifically interested in joint health applications, standardized rosehip extract capsules ensure consistent levels of the studied active compounds. For generations, European herbalists knew that rosehip was worth using. Modern clinical research has confirmed that instinct and has identified exactly which molecules deserve the credit. Plant 8, Irsam, black seed. Few plants anywhere in the world carry the historical weight that this next one does. Black seed, Nigella sativa, known also as black cumin, black caraway, or kalonji, has been used medicinally for over 2,000 years across the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia. In Islamic tradition, a saying attributed to the Prophet Muhammad describes black seed as a remedy for everything except death, a reflection of the extraordinary reverence this plant held across centuries of traditional medical practice. Ancient Egyptian healers used it. Ancient Greek physicians were aware of it. And perhaps most remarkably, black seeds were found among the burial artifacts of the pharaoh Tutankhamun, considered important enough to accompany a king into the afterlife. The primary active compound identified by modern researchers is called thymoquinone. Extensively studied for its biological activity, thymoquinone has demonstrated antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and immune-modulating effects in laboratory and early clinical research. It appears to interact with NF-κB, the same master inflammatory signaling pathway we first encountered with turmeric, potentially helping reduce excessive inflammatory activity through its own distinct chemistry. Clinical research on black seed is active and growing. Studies have explored potential applications for respiratory health, blood sugar balance, blood pressure support, and inflammatory conditions. Results are generally promising, though more rigorous large-scale clinical trials are still needed to establish firm conclusions. Practically, the seeds have a pleasantly warm, slightly bitter character. They can be sprinkled on bread, stirred into yogurt, or added to rice dishes, as they have been in traditional kitchens for centuries. Black seed oil concentrates the active compounds and can be consumed by the teaspoon or added to dressings. A traditional morning practice found across many cultures involves a small amount of black seed oil with honey. A simple daily ritual connecting present habit to thousands of years of accumulated health tradition. I want to pause here and say something important. Every plant on this list has earned its place through a combination of traditional use and scientific attention. None of them are miracle cures. They work best as part of a broader commitment to health: wholesome food, regular movement, adequate sleep, and stress management. Anyone taking prescription medications should speak with their healthcare provider before adding herbal remedies to their routine, as interactions are possible. With that said, let us continue to the final 2 plants on this list. Plant 9, cat's claw. To find our 9th plant, we travel deep into the Amazonian rainforest of Peru, where a woody vine climbs its way through layers of dense canopy, gripping the bark of trees with pairs of small, curved thorns that look exactly like the claws of a cat. Uncarya tomentosa, cat's claw. For the Ashaninka people of Peru, one of the largest indigenous communities of the Amazon, this vine has long been considered among the most important medicinal plants in the entire forest. The inner bark was harvested carefully, prepared as a long, slow decoction, and used for inflammatory joint conditions, digestive complaints, and recovery from illness. Other Amazonian communities arrived at similar conclusions through their own centuries of independent observation. When researchers began analyzing cat's claw, they found a pharmacologically interesting combination of compounds, particularly oxindole alkaloids, quinovic acid glycosides, and various polyphenols. Among the most notable findings was evidence that certain of these compounds appear to inhibit NF-κB activation, the same master inflammatory pathway associated with turmeric and black seed, now appearing in a South American vine whose traditional users had no contact whatsoever with the Ayurvedic healers of India. This convergence across unconnected cultures is one of the most compelling patterns in the study of traditional plant medicine. Different peoples, different plants, different languages, but the same biological target and the same centuries of observation pointing toward the same result. Clinical studies involving people with rheumatoid arthritis and osteoarthritis have found that cat's claw preparations helped reduce pain and swelling compared to control groups. The research base is still developing, but early evidence is consistent with the traditional applications. Cat's claw is most commonly used today as a tea made from simmering the dried inner bark or in capsule and extract form. Those taking anticoagulant or immunosuppressant medications and pregnant women should consult a healthcare professional before using it. Plant 10, Ashwagandha. We have saved what may be the most quietly profound plant for last. Not because ashwagandha is the most potent anti-inflammatory compound on this list in a direct chemical sense, but because it addresses something that most conversations about inflammation almost entirely overlook, something that affects a great many people over 50, something that science now recognizes as one of the most significant drivers of chronic inflammatory states. That something is stress. Ashwagandha, Withania somnifera, has been central to Ayurvedic medicine for over 3,000 years. Ancient texts classified it as a rasayan, a category reserved for herbs considered capable of promoting longevity and sustaining the body's health as it ages. Its Sanskrit name translates roughly as the smell of a horse, a reference to the vitality it was believed to confer. Here is the connection modern research has confirmed clearly. Chronic stress, the kind that accumulates quietly across years of responsibility, loss, and the weight of daily life, has been shown to be a potent driver of systemic inflammation. When the body lives under sustained stress, cortisol and related hormones remain chronically elevated. Over time, this dysregulates the immune system in ways that impair its ability to appropriately resolve inflammatory responses. The result is the same persistent, low-grade inflammatory state we have been discussing throughout this video. Ashwagandha is classified as an adaptogen, a plant that appears to support the body's ability to regulate its own stress response more effectively. Its primary active compounds, called withanolides, are unique to this plant. Multiple clinical trials have found that standardized ashwagandha extracts meaningfully reduce cortisol levels in adults experiencing chronic stress. Other studies have found reductions in reported anxiety and measurable improvements in sleep quality. A growing body of research is examining its direct effects on inflammatory markers in the blood, with early results that are encouraging. The deeper insight is this: if chronic stress continuously feeds inflammation, and ashwagandha helps bring the stress response back toward balance, then its anti-inflammatory contribution works at a level that direct-acting plant compounds do not reach, addressing the underlying conditions that allow inflammation to persist. Ancient Ayurvedic practitioners understood this intuitively. They did not separate stress from inflammation, or the state of the mind from the state of the body. They saw the human being as a single integrated system. modern neuroscience and immunology are arriving carefully at exactly the same conclusion. Ashwagandha root powder has been consumed in warm milk with honey for centuries, and that preparation becomes particularly meaningful when combined with turmeric and ginger into the traditional Ayurvedic golden milk. 3 plants, 3 distinct mechanisms, 1 shared goal: supporting the body's ability to find and maintain its own natural balance. Standardized ashwagandha capsules and extracts are also widely available. Now we have walked through all 10 plants together. Turmeric modulates the master inflammatory switch through curcumin. Ginger targets prostaglandin production and supports joint cartilage repair. Boswellia addresses the 5-lipoxygenase pathway, a dimension of inflammation that neither turmeric nor ginger reaches. Willow bark brings the ancient salicylate pathway that eventually gave the world aspirin. Devil's claw contributes harpicicide, backed by some of the strongest clinical evidence of any herbal medicine for joint pain. Green tea delivers EGCG catechins that modulate inflammatory cytokines and provide sustained antioxidant support. Rosehip offers GOPO and exceptional vitamin C, supporting joint tissue and cartilage health. Black seed brings thymoquinone, touching NF-κB and oxidative stress pathways through its own chemistry. Cat's claw contributes Amazonian alkaloids that converge on inflammatory pathways, also targeted by plants from completely unrelated traditions. And ashwagandha addresses the stress-inflammation connection, the root condition that makes chronic inflammation so persistent for so many people. 10 plants, 10 mechanisms, 10 traditions. And one underlying story: that human beings have been turning to the plant world for support with their most persistent health challenges for thousands of years. They were not wrong to do so. And the science is now providing the language to explain what they observed. This does not mean herbal medicine has all the answers. Modern medicine has tools that cannot be replaced, and anyone managing a serious condition should work closely with their healthcare provider. But the plant world deserves to be taken seriously by anyone committed to bringing every reasonable resource to the effort of maintaining their health. Before we close, I want to ask you one final question. Did your parents or grandparents use any of these plants or other herbal remedies as a natural part of how they cared for the family? Perhaps turmeric was simply always in the kitchen. Perhaps a particular tea appeared whenever someone was unwell. Perhaps a grandmother pressed something warm into your hands during a difficult winter and offered no explanation beyond, "This will help." Those traditions carry real knowledge, accumulated slowly over generations by people paying careful attention to what worked. Tell us about it in the comments. Those stories connect us to something worth preserving, a thread of plant wisdom that runs far back into human history and that is very much worth carrying forward. Health rarely arrives all at once. It is built quietly through small choices made consistently over time, through what we eat, what we choose to understand, and how seriously we take the signals our bodies send us. Today, you have learned something about 10 plants that research and tradition both suggest may support the body's ability to manage inflammation. Perhaps 1 or 2 of them will find their way into your daily life. Perhaps they already have, and you now understand them a little more deeply. If today's exploration was valuable to you, I warmly invite you to subscribe to Herbal Longevity. Each week we go deeper into specific plants, into the science behind traditional remedies, and into what it all means for those of us who want to age with vitality and understanding. There's always more to discover, and there are always more plants worth knowing. Thank you for spending this time here today. Take very good care of yourself, and remember, the plants have been here far longer than any of us. Patient, quietly extraordinary. All they ask is that we pay attention. Herbal Longevity. Natural health knowledge rooted in tradition, illuminated by science.